All right, everyone, I want to welcome you to Tools for Mobilizing and Organizing. This is a webinar presented by the Kingian Nonviolence Community of Practice. I want to say just a word about that community of practice. It's an emerging group of nonviolence practitioners who are seeking to weave connections and share reflections among people who are intentionally applying the heritage of active nonviolence, especially, but not limited to, those applying and developing the legacy of Kingian nonviolence. We believe that our leadership is strengthened when we're connected with others in a community of reflection and experimentation. This community of practice is for people intentionally applying the heritage of active nonviolence in our leadership in current social change movement, and for people grounded at some level in the Kingian nonviolence approach or interested to learn more. It's for people who are more advanced in Kingian nonviolence and developing it for new applications and settings. This community is a place to reflect collectively on our leadership as nonviolence practitioners, to learn from each victories and challenges, and to contribute to the development of the art and science of nonviolence. We do this so that our organizing and our nonviolence work can mature, so that we can improve our individual and collective leadership, and so that we can achieve greater successes in building peace and justice. This is the third event that the Nonviolence Community of Practice has presented. Our first presenter was Kazu Haga back in November, and our second presenter was Samuel Sarpia in January. So welcome the two of you. And today presenting will be David Jehnsen, Kezia Curtis, and Ashley Olson. And there was some bio information about them in the intros, and so I'm not going to go into that now in the interest of time. I do want to say we'll be moving back and forth between a large group and some breakout groups. And if you at some point want to raise your hand or get our attention, there are a couple of options. So there is a raise my hand option. I think if you right click on your own image, there's a way to raise your hand, or it may be in your navigation bar at the bottom. And so just for the fun of it, try to raise your hand right now. Can you see each other's raised hands? Yeah, okay, no. Some people can, some people can't. Well, that's like reality. So another option is do something like this, if the raised hand, lower hand isn't working. And another option, okay, great, yes, perfect. Thank you, everyone. And the other thing that I want to say is we'll be going into breakout groups that are just going to be divided up by the number of connections that we have on the call. And that's actually where we're going now. So I'm going to unmute you, Ashley, while I work on setting those up.
Thank you. And welcome, everyone. Like Matt said, really a lot of our goal and intention is to kind of use this space.
Can't hear you.
Sorry. How about now?
Good.
Okay. Well, really our intention is to use this space to our level of relation.
Still can't hear you. Let's see. I'm going to make sure everyone's muted. I'll mute me.
You were just hearing me like 2 minutes ago, right? How about now? Hello?
Your sound was working great about 10 minutes ago. Well, I'm going to go ahead and put people into the breakout sessions. What we're asking you, these will be groups of 3 or 4 people, and you'll have about 10 minutes in the breakouts. And in the breakout, we're asking you to just share your name, where you're calling in from, and why you are interested in the call. So, and then as time permits, anything else, other connections you want to make with each other or information you want to share about yourself, go for it. So here we go.
On screen, that was cool.
Are you just going to hang out with me?
Where am I don't quite get where I'm supposed to go. I don't click leave meeting.
No. Let's see. Where's yours supposed to be? Doesn't look like I assigned you.
Am I still unofficially as a facilitator since Zoom was downloaded from before?
I don't know. Maybe. Let's just talk. Just a second. I need to look at the chat. Hey.
How you been?
I've been pretty good. Hang on. I'm trying to just hang on. I can't chat with people if they're in the breakout. That's weird. Ashley, hi.
Can you hear me now?
Hi, Ashley.
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Okay.
I can hear you.
I'm gonna use my iPad instead.
Oh, okay.
So I'm gonna.
Okay, and just call back in. Yeah, okay. I wonder if we're like maxing out the load. Like, I wonder what happened. So I can hear you now. You could also try phoning if you have some option for phoning in addition to your video. That's what I do.
Okay.
So let's see. So I need to keep track of time here. 9:13 is when we actually went. Is about 9:21. Okay. Yeah. Hi, Zoe. I just got back from Philadelphia. I was there for training for change board meetings. Let's see who's joining us here.
It looks like there's still. Are all the people on the phone in breakout groups?
Yes.
Okay.
Hi, someone from 612. Who's joining us?
Hi, this is Andrea Aldees. I just joined in.
Hey, Andrea.
Welcome.
Hi.
This is Matt, Gwen, and we're actually in breakout groups, but we're the people who are like still hanging out in the living room. So you joined the living room hangout and the breakout group. So welcome.
Great.
Yeah. And yeah, this is Matt, Gwen. I'm calling in from Portland, Oregon, and the other ones want to say hi.
I'm Zoe Van Nostrand. I'm joining from Ithaca, New York.
Hey, Zoe. This is Ashley Olson. I'm joining from Wenatchee, Washington.
Erin Tofty, also from Wenatchee, Washington.
And why don't we just go back around and say something about why you're interested in this call today?
Also, I see a bunch of phone numbers on my screen that are all muted. And since phone can't choose to mute themselves, I don't know.
Ah, interesting.
Because there's 2 pages that I see.
Yeah, on my screen, I'm just in breakout screen management, so.
Oh.
I'm going to try and make you a co-host, Zoe.
I stopped working 4 months ago and still gonna do some.
Oh, well, let me do that. Well, I hope the people on the phone are not muted in there.
For Ashley and Aaron, who I can see, I was the racial justice organizing intern for Matt up until December.
So Zoe, we have maybe not physically met like visually met.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So what drew people to this call today? I'm going to see if I can figure out the muting, but if you want to just keep the conversation going, go for it.
Well, I was drawn into the call because while I was working with On Earth Peace, I was really impressed by how all of the staff handled conflict and difficulty within our organizing, and particularly being younger and seeing how they dealt with that in a more professional setting. That was something that I was very impressed by while I was working with them and wanted to try to learn how to bring into my life. And drew me call to be more like Matt.
Oh.
Emulating leaders, some of the best ways of learning.
Well, I'm here because Ashley made it sound really, really interesting, and I just want to learn more.
This is Andrielle. I was going to say the same thing. So, yay, Ashley.
Well, Andrielle has done a day certification program, and at my previous job was incredibly supportive of the Kingian Nonviolence that we were doing. So thanks for being here, Andrielle. It's so good to hear your voice.
Yes.
So I see a couple other phone people who might still be muted, but we do see you. Hello.
You can see things that I can't, Zoe, so that's interesting. I'm going to call everyone back together in just another minute here. So it looks like some of the people on phone might have been muted and disconnected. So,
well, some of the numbers that I see were never renamed either. And since I can see them, I assume they're still in this group, but I don't know. Yeah, but it's exciting, Matt. I got accepted to a master's program in comparative social change in Ireland, which I'm starting in the fall, which is exciting.
Gorgeous.
Yeah.
Wow, cool. Hi, Jacob.
Hey, Jacob. I'm going to begin calling people back from the breakouts. So I think this is going to give everyone a warning that they're coming back. So here we go.
Oh, okay.
Okay. We'll continue.
Yeah, you'll have to get back because I think that was going to be an interesting question.
Okay, thank you.
I think that I hear Tammy and Joan May. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. I'm having technical difficulties. I won't connect, so I had to do phone.
Okay. No problem. Let me
caller. We're back. Matt, that was fun. Thank you.
Great. We were worried that there might have been some technical problems with people on the phone. It looks like people on the phone are not muted right now. Did that work for people who are on the phone?
Am I muted?
You're not.
It did.
Okay, I'll mute myself.
Okay. I'm going to rename Joan May. Okay. Welcome back, everyone. And I think that we're handing it to Kezia and or David. So I'm going to unmute both of you.
And actually, So I'm just going to actually quickly introduce David, and David is going to kind of give us an introduction to the content. So David Jehnsen worked with Dr. King in this 1960s Chicago and had an opportunity to learn from both Bayard Rustin and Richard Hauser, and became really lifelong friends with Richard Hauser. And so the conversation and the content that David's going to overview today are things that he's learned throughout his time working with Hauser. We'll kind of, on one of the tools, we'll kind of show you the evolution of the 7 categories of opinion as it is known today, more as the spectrum of allies. But I think that history is so important to kind of making the connections to the relevancy of the content that David is bringing forth. And I think it's just so cool that when we were preparing for this call, we were trying to find things to scan and set ahead of time. And David's like, most of this stuff that I'm sharing is all things that Richard and I just chatted about, and I have on different loose leaf paper laying around the house. And so it's just a real honor to be able to spend time with him today and bring to life some of the things that are part of the Kingian Nonviolence curriculum in the Leader's Manual that sometimes don't get talked as much about. And so David, we're just so happy that you're here with us today to kind of share. So if you could bring us some contextual history to this work, that would be amazing.
Well, thank you. I'm really happy to be here as well. The often overlooked fact is that the King era, as we refer to that period in the human rights movement and the civil rights movement in the United States, it's often overlooked that it was really a part of an international movement of nonviolence that goes way beyond that 15-year period of Martin Luther King. And that this was a cross-fertilization period between the international movements and the within North America and within the United States movements. Richard Hauser was instrumental. He was a young person in Austria, Jewish fellow who worked and cut his teeth on social movements in the underground against Hitler, and ended up in Europe working with British intelligence on the latter part of the Second World War, and ended up staying there. And he and his wife Hepzibah, who was a concert pianist, with her brother, the cellist, Yehudi Menuhin, Hepzibah and Richard really devoted their lives to these social movements. And in 1963, Bayard Rustin, who was had worked with the Fellowship of Reconciliation in the 40s and the 50s, as well as other people that worked closely with Martin Luther King, did a workshop, a seminar in Chicago for people who were organizing groups to be part of the March on Washington. I was one of the people in that group, and Bayard used an illustration, which we're going to talk about this morning, that became the 7 categories of opinion. And while most civil rights leaders in Chicago didn't want to come to the seminar, some of us did. And it wasn't until 1968 and 69 when I met Richard that I began to connect the two in terms of the illustration that Bayard had used and a more developed illustration that Richard shared on the 7 categories of opinion that we need to engage. So all of these intellectual history of ideas permeated and impacted the movements of nonviolence during the King era, including Martin Luther King himself, and contact that he had with Bayard Rustin and Jim Farmer and A.J. Musty and Glenn Smiley and a number of other people, Stuart Meacham at the American Friends Service Committee and so on. All of these people were linked to the international nonviolent movements. And so it's kind of an interesting historical context that we enter into today, because it was not, the movement taking place in the south of the United States was not in isolation of the movements taking place across the world over a long period of time. So it's kind of exciting to share some of this materials. For some of you, you may have seen pieces of it. And again, our focal point is to shift from emphasis on the certification and training workshop process to training of mobilizing and organizing groups and people and people who are engaged in the practice of nonviolence, not just the education about nonviolence. So welcome everybody, and let's, Kezia, do you want to add anything to this, or Ashley? Well, good. When we deal with the reality of organizing and mobilizing, the first issue we have to confront is the fact that we face a paternalistic, what we call the charisma, anti-charisma, and the turnaround. We face a paternalistic reality where people often are looking for some savior and someone to lead them out of the mess of the reality, and often will become very dependent upon that person. So the first step in organizing and mobilizing is to deal with this charismatic issue of rejecting the paternalistic structure. I think we have an illustration here on in your upper left-hand corner under the charisma, where we're looking at the paternalistic structure, which is fathers and sons and mothers and daughters if it's paternalistic, or totalitarian if it's based on authoritarianism, such as military hierarchy, etc. In this case, people are loved as objects, and it's always top down, it's always one way. There's no compensation up the ladder from below. It's all obedience to the above. So if people are in that context, our first job is to challenge that and turn that around. The objective of this is to reach what we call the turnaround, which is the respect relationship, where people are sharing common purpose, where they respect each other's leadership abilities, and leader of leaders are present, that people compensate to each other. It can be the foundation for the democratic way of life, whereas the paternalistic relationship can only be the foundation of racism and poverty and militarism. So we must reach the turnaround, and what this is about today in this call is what we term anti-charisma, and in order to reach the turnaround. What is it we do to change that relationship? And so to look at the anti-charisma issue, we want to look at 4 or 5 patterns of leadership that relate to this anti-charismatic process. All of these leadership patterns have to do with how we respond to or relate to the power elite, the paternalistic or authoritarian power elite. And the first category of leadership pattern is that of the power leader. This is a person who is really the genuine, authentic representative of the group, can be replaced by the group at any time, manages the internal affairs of the group, and represents the group in all matters addressing issues between the group and the power elite. The nature provides ways that leadership is exchanged, whether it's geese flying and the lead goose falling back after a period of leadership and breaking the wind and replaced by the next goose in line, or it happens throughout the animal world, and it happens among people too. And this is a peer group. Power leader is the product of a peer group and feels typical of the members of the group, is typical of the group, and of course can be replaced by the group at any time, so there's a certain kind of accountability there. And it's one of the 2 patterns of leadership that we need to understand and respect and work with. And it's a person who is a product of the group. The second pattern is something created by the power elite, which is kind of the establishment power leader. And this is someone who is sent to be the leader of a particular group, like the youth leader who's 30 years old and the young people are 15 years of age. That person's a power establishment leader, and the group is usually kind of set on by this person, and group either goes to sleep or dies. It's kind of lifeless. We see this in communities throughout our society, where the authorities will appoint community advisory groups for urban planning, for this or that or the other thing, and they'll name the leader from downtown. And of course, they wonder why the group is so lifeless. Well, the power establishment leader makes the group basically dysfunctional, and it obscures the real issues that are on the table between the power leader and their constituency and the power elite. The third category, the third leadership pattern, is something we kind of look at as a community relations person. Also a person who's on a kind of a string to the power elite, and who tries to restore all these different groups confidence in the power elite that, you know, we'll solve these problems. Just have faith in the mayor and the village council and so on and so forth, and don't be so worried about it. In fact, it's said that in 1980, President Reagan was because our society grandfather figure. We wanted someone to tell us it was all right, that things were going to be better, even though the facts said otherwise. So the community relations leader can be very dangerous and destructive to any kind of solidarity in the community. Closely related to that is kind of a charismatic leader that's also usually on a string from the power elite, who says, follow me, I'll lead you to the promised land, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, they're basically out for their own charisma and want people to follow them in that capacity. That's dysfunctional too. Now, that being said, we indicate that wherever you have strong personalities, you have charisma. So we need to work with the charismatic leaders who are committed to the goals that we're working on. And but we can't avoid training groups to not be dependent upon charisma. This was a very prevalent issue, controversial issue throughout the 15 years of organizing and mobilizing, would only mobilize in the context of Martin Luther King and other people's charisma, which of course had no lasting impact. But where people learned how to organize and mobilize in the interest of the people as a whole, those produce lasting groups and effective programs and projects. So we want to understand charisma and understand that we are not rejecting charismatic persons, but saying that they need to work with us as a part of a team. The fourth type of project is the influence leader. This is a person like Socrates. This is a person that speaks from an independent base. This is a person who makes maximum use of the fact that they are an outsider and that they cannot be a power leader, and that they need to work with the natural power leaders that are produced by the group. And so the influence leader speaks to both the power elite and to the community and to the peer groups and the power leaders, everywhere from training to cajoling and provoking people. There's a great story of, in this case, Cesar Chavez. Somebody would come from a field and they would say, Mr. Chavez, we need you to come to our field. We need to organize a union. And he would say, well, you get 5, 6 people together from your field. He said, I can't really do anything to help you myself, but I'll come and meet with you and see what we can do together. And he would go to the meeting on Tuesday evening or whenever it was, and if there was only the person that requested the help, then he said, I'm sorry, there's nothing we can do because you need a group of people here who are going to fight for the union, and I can support that and find ways and resources and so on, but it needs to come from you. So the turnaround, the charisma, the anti-charisma, and the turnaround are all tied into people riding white horses who deliver salvation. We are people who can work as part of a larger team and a network to bring about this turnaround and have a constructive base, the basis for a democratic social movement and a nonviolent social movement. So it's a very important topic we're dealing with here in terms of organizing and mobilizing. And I think I'll just hold it for the moment right there.
So, so Kezia and I are just going to kind of try to bring some of these concepts to life. And so with thinking about these 5 types of leaders, not only are we looking at it when we're trying to build movements and momentum towards a specific action, but we need to understand how different folks are showing up to our group. So if we're a power leader, of course that the power establishment is going to send leaders in, and we're going to have those community relations folks who are amongst our group. And our goal is really going to be to balance those personalities so that that leader doesn't run off with the group, right? And so our job is to kind of have a lens on these leadership roles for the survival of our group, but also to pay attention to how we show up as leaders in different spaces. So we are an influence leader for some groups. We are the power leader in other groups. We may be hired by an organization and maybe sitting in a power establishment leader role. And having a lens of these different roles will help you figure out the best ways to kind of function within a group. And so I was just going to share a real quick example. Matt put up the bigger group thing that shows like the different types of leaders all in one sheet. And so, for example, when I was hired by the university to create programming, I was a power establishment leader. I was hired by the university to come in and do this programming. I know and I wanted to empower students to be the leaders of that program. And so having that power establishment leader role while trying to function within a program was something that I needed to balance. And before I could even move forward with the programming, I was asked by the department to work with key constituency groups to sort of get behind the programming shift, right? So we're doing something different. So even within this one role, I was asked to kind of show up in different places. My goal was to cultivate power leaders within the student program, the PEACE program that was created in order to so that students had ownership over the program content, the outcomes, and the ways in which we move forward. And so it was interesting to be in that group, to work with the program and try to shed that power establishment leader role of students really wanting me to come up with all of the answers and guide, wanting to empower them to kind of make a difference. And we would hire folks at times to come in and be influence leaders. So Kazu, for instance, David had came in to be an influence leader with that group and kind of provide them experiences. But I also tried to reject that role and provoke the group and try to step outside of the group and kind of be that influence leader at times when trying to move them along and really support the idea that there was internal power leaders within the group. And so their lens is to kind of protect the work, but also sort of to understand our own leadership in ways that we can ensure that we're helping the group success rather than hindering it. Kezia, are there things that you'd like to add?
No, I think you covered it well, Ashley. Thank you.
So we wanted to just kind of give space for anyone to kind of raise their hand or ask questions for points of clarity on this section.
I was taking notes. Can you go over, because I feel like I missed one, can you just do the names of the 5 types of leaders again?
Sure.
Like without their characteristics, just their names?
The power leader, who's the authentic representative of a peer group.
Mm-hmm.
The power establishment leader, who is a person in a position that's been appointed by the authorities to be the group leader, and the more or less community relations pattern, which is also a person on a string to the authorities, which seeks to restore confidence in the power elite to solve the problems for the people. Similar to that is the charismatic person, also often on a string. Sometimes it's a technical expertise, but charisma is a more usual thing. Follow me because I know best, and I'll take you to the promised land. And then the influence leader, who speaks from an independent base.
Thank you.
Now, there has been a question of some of the background of some of this, and in the another component of this program, the Advanced Kingian Nonviolence program, there are some residential sessions where we use the New Society Handbook, which is a draft publication by Richard and Kezia Hauser called The New Society, that has extensive leadership and group chapters in it that go deeper into these issues. But we spend so much of our time in organizations and in groups, and yet we so seldom have the chance to study the dynamics and patterns of leadership and group behavior. And so we feel that people in the nonviolent practice and education work need to also have these access to these kinds of concepts and tools.
David, Tanya and Elise from Wilmington are raising their hand. Just a second, I'll unmute you. Oops, you're unmuted.
So I have a question. For example, I'm the leader of an organization, and this is a hypothetical situation. I'm the leader of an organization. The organization's mission embraces pacifism, in which no violence under any conditions is acceptable. But we have members of our organization that start to say, no, sometimes violence is acceptable when there's a dictator in power, or and they're impacting the lives of their citizens. How do I negotiate that role of wanting people to take, and that's the majority position, say that there's a group that sort of takes over that position that's different from our organization's mission. What am I expected to do as a leader in that kind of situation?
Well, in the May training program, we'll go into some depth on this, but the issue really is nonviolence the opposite of being violence, or is it something different? And what do we understand violence to be? And so we think it's important that we really understand, to some extent, Martin Luther King was a Hegelian in that he looked at things in terms of the thesis and the antithesis and its opposites. And what we'll find in the residential training is that nonviolence is not the opposite of violence. It's actually a synthesis of another kind of analysis. And so it's more of a dialectical situation. So what we'll want to do is learn how to define violence and how to define what nonviolence is. And so, for example, you have two ways of expressing nonviolence: non-violence, which indicates what you're not doing, action you're not taking, or nonviolence is one word, a noun, which is a philosophy and a way of life. Those are two very different things. Reactive and protest-oriented people use the first, the non-violence, because their emphasis is on what they're not doing. And oftentimes, this is a group of people who say nonviolence cannot work in all situations. Secondly, nonviolence is not an insurance policy. But what it does do is draw violence out of the situation, and the practitioners of nonviolence take this onto themselves in terms of the practice of nonviolence, rather than adding to the violence. So these are things that more extensive training, which you will be a part of, we'll be discussing. and practicing in some detail.
There are a couple of hands up, and soon we're going to be moving to the next piece of content, but I would like to give Dina and Rivera a chance to share your questions and have a brief exchange or response from David. So Dina, you're on. Here, I'll unmute you.
Okay, hello everyone. I'm really intrigued by these 5 different types of leaders, and especially those, seen as destructive versus effective. One of the things I'm wondering is if you enter into a situation where a culture is accustomed to a certain type of leader, maybe even one of the destructive forms, is there a period of transition or suggestions on how to take that leadership and move it into one of the more effective types of leadership?
I think there are always choices about how you function. For example, you can be cast, and I think the example, Ash, you can be cast in a power establishment role, but you can use that position to stimulate the development of the group. And you can still be an enabling person in the positive sense of that word with the group to develop their own objectives, their own agenda, and support their agenda. So it's kind of like not what you call me, it's what I answer to. And so we are often put in positions like that. Someone just raised something about funding. Where does the funder fit in this? Likewise, somebody in a funding capacity can be play a stimulating role in how they implement funding strategies and work with groups that desire financial support, or they can build on the dependency and be, further the dependence, which is unhealthy for the group and the project. And I know many people who are doing fundraising work for other groups that do it in a very stimulating way, and that it doesn't accept the power establishment role that the power elite and the authorities define for foundation or fundraising capacity.
Thanks, David. I'm going to go to Rivera for your question. You're unmuted.
I just wanted to mention to Tanya and Elise that one thing to bring into their discussion with their organization is the work of Erica Chenoweth and those clear statistics about the use of nonviolent action against haters in extremely repressive situations. Sometimes it helps to shift the conversation away from morality and into effectiveness when dealing with differences of opinion about violence and nonviolence. So I just want to offer them that resource of knowledge. And then the question I have is, you outlined the 5 types of leadership or different kinds of leaders. What about the dynamics of these within shared leadership, where you have maybe many cooks in the kitchen and you have many leaders within an organization? So if you could comment a little bit about a lot of these, some of these point to the singular leader structure, so the power leader or the charismatic leader, but what about organizing and movements wherein you have a very intentionally shared leadership structure? Thank you.
Well, 2 things. One is, of course, I think Erica's book, Erica Chenoweth and Maria Stefan's book on nonviolent resistance, I think they looked at 100 years of nonviolent resistance programs and civil resistance programs and found the nonviolent ones to be very effective. And because they were looked at not just in terms of moral issues, but in terms of effectiveness. And I think it's really great what they produced, and they're now working on, I think, a sequel to that, to update it. But your primary question, each healthy group, people are leaders of themselves first. And the leader of the group is a leader of leaders. And so you always have that creative tension within a group if it's vital and healthy. And that's very important. The second thing is that you shift from one pattern of leadership to another, somewhat along the lines that Ashley mentioned, according to the context that you're working in. For example, Malcolm X was a power leader in Black society during the period he lived, and was an influence leader to a whole generation of people, white, young, radical people, in a larger society. Martin Luther King, on the other hand, was an influence leader within Black society and within the broader society. And the only place he was a power leader to some extent was in the context of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference Board, where he was president. So you move according to the context that you're in from one type of leadership pattern to another.
Thanks. And I think that it's time for us to move on to the next step in the content. Thanks for the great questions. If there are other questions that haven't been addressed, if you would put them in the chat box, we can have the presenters respond to them after the call. So, and if someone wants to throw, thanks for putting the summary there of, or the intro to Erica and Maria Stephan's book, Rivera, and if someone else would put a link, or if you would put a link, that'd be great. Okay, I think we're moving to the next step.
David's going to share with us about top-down, bottom-up organizing and the 6 categories of leadership.
Thank you. As a footnote to the reference about Erica Chenoweth, you can go to a 22-hour course that includes some of our material and some of their material at the United States Institute of Peace. And at this point, it's still available in 6 chapters, about 22 hours at your own pace, to look at the history of nonviolence movements and civil resistance. So you might want to check that out. It's going to ultimately cost $400 a person, according to USIP, but it's still free now, and I think you could still access it on their website. Now, as we move into the second part of this, we want to look at the different categories of power and leadership in a community that we're working with and put this into an organizing and mobilizing context. And I think we have a couple of illustrations here where, for many of you, you're familiar with the top-down, bottom-up concept of organizing. The top-down approach has a great deal of authority and resources, but no credibility in the community. The bottom-up by itself has a lot of power for short-term periods, but cannot sustain itself and does not have a sanction over administrative practices and policies. So the nonviolent process is this concern and a spiral, a dynamic that stimulates top-down and bottom-up for hopeful action. Now, in doing this, there are 6 categories of leadership that we need to engage with. Not just 1, not just 2, but we need to engage the public of these 6 different categories so that we avoid the pitfalls of single issue kind of social change. And those groups include, as you can see on the chart, oppressed groups such as minorities, women, gay, lesbian groups, other kinds of sexual orientation issue groups. All these groups have survival needs in the present context. And we just need to reflect upon that in the current social political context of society. Youth is a very important group that have a stake in the future and need to be involved. And we're talking about youth from age 2 to age 82. We're talking about people in religious contexts. We're talking about community-based organizations, voluntary associations, fraternities, chambers of commerce, all kinds of groups. We're talking about local and state government that have as a part of their official mandate that they're supposed to be dealing with these problems. We're talking about people in education contexts that are where it's legitimate to talk about social problems and issues. Now, these 6 categories have top-down components, like you have a bishop, or you have a school superintendent and a school board, etc. You have a citywide youth organization, all these things, but they also have their grassroots bottom-up counterparts. Pardon me. Such as the local school, the local PTA, the local congregation or synagogue or mosque, the grassroots community associations, civic associations, and so on. And so we have to look at the involvement, and in another community of practice seminar, we'll go further into this, but we're looking at these 6 categories of leadership on this top-down, bottom-up axis as the groups we need to engage. Thank you. In the concern that we have, the framed issue that we have. So the spiral you see on this diagram is the issue that we've framed, that people in the top-down and the bottom-up postures, whichever group they're a part of on the left-hand column and across the bottom, the grassroots version of that, can respond to. So Martin Luther King's framed issue for the Alabama movement was to guarantee the right to participate in government. And that people could respond to that both at the congressional level and the national leadership levels, as well as the grassroots level. In fact, they said Martin Luther King could speak to the PhDs and the no Ds about guaranteeing the right to participate in government, and everybody knew what he was talking about. So, so these things have come a long way from Bayard Rustin's concept, where there's 4% of the issue are friends and 4% are dangerous. And our job and the challenge from him was to engage the other 92% that we didn't know about. And of course, that has now moved to, through Richard's work and other international people's work, to 7 categories of opinion, where there are more specific categories of this, so that we have to deliberately engage people from these different things to get them to address the issue and take a position on the issue. It's kind of interesting because Gandhi credited Daniel O'Connell in the middle of the 19th century, who was the representative from Ireland to the British Parliament and a strong leader of nonviolence in Ireland, who would often address as many as 5,000 and 10,000 people with no microphones about nonviolence and the importance of it in the dealing with the conflict with England. And Gandhi credited him with this concept of categories of public opinion that you have to confront and engage to move the society toward and persuade people toward your point of view and the cause that you represent. Now, the 7 categories of opinion, because of their evolution, many, many different people have adapted this to what now we refer to as a spectrum of allies. And we have some examples of all the different, there's 4 or 5 different drawings of this out there and displays. But basically what they're about is that we don't look at society and the community as monolithic and somehow everybody's opposed to change, because that's not really the case. There's all kinds of subgroups of opinion and behavior and concerns and overlapping needs. And it's not just us versus our opposition, but it's this other 92% that we need to engage with and hear and cajole and have dialogue with, all in attempts to win people over to our point of view that we represent with the nonviolent movement. So the history of this concept of public opinion is very important for organizers and mobilizers to understand, because it's not only 10% of what we're doing, at most 20% is our personal involvement. 80% or 90% is really the task and the job we're doing as a nonviolent practitioner. So therefore, we can't just be advocates. We need to be mobilizers and organizers and people who help the power leaders in the community and the groups that they represent engage in the real issues that we face. So I think that there may be some comments or some questions on this. And Ashley and Kezia, you want to add some to this?
Yeah, Matt, there's another example and another about I think one more slide.
Okay. Well, tell me what you're looking for.
The top vertical top-down planning one that's right after that spectrum.
Okay, I'll go to the next one. Okay, great. Sure, okay.
So really, so when thinking about top-down, bottom-up organizing, right, we can break this down into mapping this all out. But I just wanted to kind of give a small example of utilizing this as a reference. So when I was at UW River Falls, I came to campus and so hired into a power establishment leader role. And there were different groups that were trying to create gender neutral restrooms on campus. And so I started to have conversations with them folks, and they were really frustrated because they were not getting people within our institution to kind of make the decision. And so we started to have different conversations with different groups. And so the Gender and Sexuality Alliance was definitely leading the way. Facilities management was kind of getting named and shamed quite often for not moving. And what I did is just started to go in and kind of build relationships across the institution. So started to have more conversations about, okay, our goal is gender neutral restrooms. What other groups are impacted by this issue? So we had families, we had people with physical disabilities. And I also knew that Residence Life was trying to add elevators to their buildings, and where facilities management had offered gender neutral restrooms was in the basement. So it was just starting to kind of build conversations, build allies across these different groups. And when I think about it in this way, those groups were very much present. Also, in those conversations, we were able to start building a narrative that was going to resonate with a larger population better. So it went from gender neutral restrooms to inclusive restrooms, right? And the focus was not just about having access for trans youth or trans students on campus, but it was about access for families. It was about accessibility, and it was about safety. And so within that context, we were able to just, all I needed to do is I actually identify friendly folks. I wasn't trying to sway anyone who was completely opposed, but just starting to look at those different categories and try to find folks to bring the conversation and movement in a more inclusive manner towards hopeful action. And we ended up getting 17 gender neutral restrooms on campus within about 6 months. And most of them were just sign changes, but we had to do facilities analysis to make sure that we were meeting building codes. But then that also got an additional restroom retrofitted and constructed, and a commitment from the campus and a broader audience of folks to continue to ensure that there's neutral spaces and family restrooms in any renovations or future buildings. So just an example, it can be used in small scale to large scale around organizing. Kezia, I know you're going to jump in with your own example.
Ask David if he could speak more around how these things overlap with top down, bottom up, and how they overlap one another. Could you speak on that a little more?
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely.
David, could you hear that?
No, I didn't.
Kezia asked Can you ask again, Kezia?
Yeah. I was just asking David if you could speak more about how top-down, bottom-up organizing and the 7 categories of opinion, like how they overlap, because I just see a lot of overlapping, but wanted to know if you could speak to that a little more.
The overlap between the leadership categories and the top-down, bottom-up?
Top-down, bottom-up, and 7 categories of opinion.
We look at a situation, a scenario in a community where we're working, and we see these categories of leadership in the community and groups of public opinion in the community, and they do overlap. And so what we want to do is, within each of those 6 categories of leadership, there are these 7 categories of opinion. There are people in all phases of those categories of opinion within each group. And so we need to approach these groups with the knowledge that we have to engage those different categories of opinion within that group and not make assumptions that everybody in that group, because they're called XYZ, are 100% in favor of the project that you're working on. So we have to root out what people's thinking is, what their opinions are on this issue. And so that's a part of the spiral process, the dynamics of the top-down, bottom-up, is how we engage these publics. For example, in the formation of the vision for the U.S. Institute of Peace, we had 7 questions from the Congress to answer, like, are peace skills trainable? Are they something that could be institutionalized in university or in education programs? There were 7 different questions that Congress wanted to answer. Are there models in the private sector that can do the job better than something in the public sector? But what wasn't there was these 7 categories of opinion. So we put together something instead of congressional hearings. We put together public seminars where we took the 7 questions from the top down, i.e. the Congress, and we took people from the 7 categories and held public seminars in 27 areas of the country. And we invited people who were very dangerous to the idea of an Academy of Peace, people who were hostile to it, people who were unfriendly to it, people who were negatively neutral, and if it really came to pass, they were going to try to block it. People who were positively neutral when they began to see ways that it could be effective, etc. So we looked at the 7 categories in terms of the 7 questions and had people from across the spectrum responding to each of the 7 questions. So looking at the top-down, bottom-up process, looking at the 6 categories of leadership, and looking at the 7 categories of opinion, these are all a part of our IQ, so to speak, as organizers and mobilizers in a nonviolent fashion, that we have this in our head that we are trying to probe and cajole and root out the expression of people's true feelings in wherever they're at on this spectrum.
Matt, and I'm just like kind of keeping an eye on time, and we have about 20 minutes left. I'm wondering if we choose to forego the breakout groups and just have a more extensive Q&A.
I think it's your call, Ashley. Yeah.
Are there other questions that folks are wanting answers to from David?
No,
right now?
keep it here.
Probably spend some time that way. Cool. Thank you. So anyone?
So feel free to raise your hand or put something in chat or wave your hand if the raising hand isn't working. And I'm going to unmute the people who are on phones too, just to check with you about any questions. Folks who are on phones, Any contributions or questions at this point?
This is Tammy, and I don't have any at this point.
Thanks.
Not at this point.
Okay. Well, I'm going to remute folks on the phones. And anybody else raising hands or questions or comments? There's Jim. I see you. And then I see Mary Lou.
Hey,
Jim?
I just bumped into a quote online which echoed the provocative observation that Martin Luther King was talking about a global movement, and it's in the chat box if anybody wants to see it.
Thanks. Mary Lou? I'll unmute you. There you go.
Okay. I'd like to ask David if he could talk more about those public seminars that they had around the U.S. Institute of Peace. How did it work out inviting people of all those different types of opinions, and why was it important to have people of all those different opinions?
Basically, we had two tasks. One is to educate the commissioners that a West Point for Peaceniks on the Hudson that graduated 2,000 consultant experts a year in peace and conflict resolution was not going to fly. We had to educate the commissioners as commissioners to a more sophisticated understanding of what a new federal institution could do and contribute to this field. The second thing is we had to educate a constituency of people across the nation who thought they were in support of an Academy of Peace, but couldn't really say more than a paragraph as to why that was justified. So we had to educate a public constituency and a commissioner constituency around what concept ought to be created that could help this nation with peace building and peacemaking.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Actually, in the Chicago movement, we did something very similar with the tenant union project, where we had 400 tenants of Condor Costellas, where we were organizing tenant unions. We had the city building department send inspectors to a public hearing, and we had Martin Luther King sitting on the podium not to speak, but to listen. And so 400 people expressed their indignation over the rats and roaches and unpainted buildings after 40 years and all kinds of devastating experiences people had had. And when Martin Luther King was finally asked at the end of the program to make a few comments, he made one of the best unrecorded speeches that he ever made. It was powerful because he was brought to a new level of his own personal awareness of what these tenants have been through. So we have to realize that as nonviolence organizers and mobilizers, we're doing social drama. In some respects, it's a part of our job, that we're putting realities out on the table for people to have to address them in ways that they maybe hadn't thought about them. And so I use those two examples, the USIP and the tenant union organizing in the Chicago movement, as examples of how we need to do this. You can look at Selma. The March to Montgomery was the same type of process. We could go on and list many other examples.
So I put in the chat box, we're not going into the breakout groups, but I put in the chat box the questions that we had designed for them. And so I just offer those in case people want to respond in the large group now. What concepts resonate with your own organizing? How do you see these concepts overlapping, or how do you apply this to your movement work? So you may have more follow-up questions, or you may want to be sharing and reflecting about how this does or doesn't connect to what you're actually working on. Who'd like to speak? Okay, so what I'm going to do is just like that. So Ashley, I think I'm going to go ahead and put it in pairs for 5 minutes, and then we'll come back for the closing, the couple of things we have for closing.
Perfect. Thanks, Matt.
Okay, so get ready. Going into pairs. Okay, here we go. 2 or 3 people in each pair. Get ready.
Matt, are we in the overflow one?
Yeah, I think we're in the hangout room.
Okay, cool.
We're like in the coffee lounge or something like that. Samuel, is your sound working any better? Looks like we have C. Smith.
That's my lady.
Also. Oh, Carol, hi.
I just
one of the things that it makes me think, I mean, that just as I'm sitting here reflecting about this and now being in this group with you, Zoe, thinking about applying these perspectives versus creating programs related to racial justice, like the difference between organizing versus programmatic work. And I think that what you and I were doing last year, a lot of it was establishing the context for being able to do some organizing now, because there wasn't any critical mass yet at all. But it's easy then to get on the trajectory of we do program versus we organize. And I think this is really pushing towards intentional practice of organizing.
Yeah. And what I was also thinking, just because particularly in reading through the Google Doc of what people's lived experiences, since I'm in outdoor education right now, I'm a little farther away from a lot of the like directly in social change movements. Hi, Daniel. But I'm feeling it's really exciting to me because still in this position I'm doing, I'm trying to pull in and make the kind of changes that I would want to have in any place that I work. And it's interesting because I am seeing how these concepts can work. I'm just trying to figure out how my role will work in being the most effective that I can in the different positions I have. So it can apply, but it connected in my own mind. I'm not sure if I can explain it.
Yeah, figuring out your role. Yeah. Any other reflections? Can you just hold that there, Daniel?
It was funny. So as we were preparing for the call, I just feel like I was just like zoomed back into remembering, right? Like how much I haven't brought some of, specifically the styles of leadership to like my framework of thinking about the work, but as much. And just really helped me. Hey, Daniel, you're so handsome, sir. And just kind of really reminded me of like, okay, like how do I really reject the leadership position that I have been in, and but then what ways and what times is it appropriate for me to maintain the power leader role? And I think I've tried to reject even at times the power leader role by not remembering that it's okay to be in that role as long as we're continuing to cultivate leaders within the group.
Yeah, it's this whole question of not being co-opted and like acknowledging I'm a power establishment leader in my role, and how do I use that to really to not be co-opted, but to actually organize and, hi guys.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ken, you're welcome back. You're in the living room container. Oh, Tanya's unmute. Matt, you're on mute too.
Well, if we can. Okay, we'll talk more later.
Yes, please, let's.
Yeah,
I want to hear more.
Your email. I'll get your email. Nice meeting you.
Thank you. You too.
Okay. Bye.
I was saying this is the center. This is the Peace Center. So
Yeah.
it looks very homey.
Oh, cool. I love it.
I'm really excited to have you guys both talk next week.
A community of practice around it. So we're being whisked back.
Welcome back. All right, Kezia, do you want to lead us in that closing activity?
Yeah. So I want to invite folks to take some time and like close your eyes or just like ground yourself for a minute and think of a word that that will move you forward in like mobilizing and organizing and like your perspective areas. So just like take some moments of quiet to just like think of that word. So hopefully everyone has like thought of this word or something that has like inspired from the conversation that we've had today. So I'm gonna count down to 3, and at 3, I'm gonna ask that you yell out that word. And yelling out your power, allowing your words to take up space your body can't. Shout it into the cracks our ancestors have pounded into the foundation of white supremacy and colonialism. Make your voice take up the space you never thought it could into the future spaces of our movement. So, 1, 2, 3.
Strategize.
Marketing people. Hey, Sherelle.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And if you want, to help kind of make this a little bit more of a taking up even more space, if you would share your word on social media with the hashtag KingianCOP, we can find you, or kind of share any reflections that you have. If you want to use that hashtag, that'll kind of help us kind of figure out the impact and the depth call on you all today. So thank you so much for being here with us, for being a part of this community of practice. We do have some future opportunities for you to continue to engage. We'll have more community of practice calls as we're able to create them as a leadership team. We also have a good subset of our team working on developing an introduction to Kingian nonviolence, which will be an online webinar. Our hope is to kind of do that in May or June. The other element that we have coming up is an incredible book club opportunity. And I think book club isn't necessarily the right word, but it's more of a seminar studying the thinking, so the philosophy and strategy behind of Dr. King's thinking in the movement. So we'll be reading excerpts from his 5 books. And Mary Lou and Joan May have done an incredible job finding complementary readings to each of Dr. King's 5 books that bring a voice of women to that analysis as well. And so that'll be an awesome opportunity that will kind of span quite a few months, because there'll be 5 different books that we'll be kind of exploring. And so information will come to you via email. We won't sell your emails to anyone, but we will continue to use the email that you registered with us for this call today to share upcoming opportunities to engage and continue to to build our collective work and influence in our communities. And so thank you for for what you gave, and we hope that despite it being challenging to kind of meet everyone in this space, that you'll go into that check-in document that Matt shared and just kind of get to know folks. It might be a great way to kind of follow up and exchange contact info. But thank you, and light and love to everyone as you go about the remainder of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yep. Mahalo.
Goes around like that.
And some of us can hang out here. If you want to stick around and talk for a few more minutes, the line's not going to close.
Is Pam here from Chicago?
Hey, Pam.
Hi, Pam.
Matt, do you have information on David's event in Columbus?
Is that her?
Oh, yeah, sorry. I forgot to share that one. Tanya, do you want to share, or David?
A group of us from Wilmington College are going up to have a concentrated training session about Kingian nonviolence on May 24th, 25th, and part of 26th. I believe this is an opportunity for other people to join, and I'll let David talk from there.
Get in contact with me. Either through the website, www.kingianaround.info, or you can contact me at my email, ihrrdj@gmail.com. And I can give you cost information and logistics and so on. But we have room for 5 or 6 other people, at least. People coming from around the country outside of Ohio should plan to come in Tuesday evening, the 23rd, Tuesday afternoon or evening.
Hey, Jim.
I had a request. I'm interested in a nonviolent theory created by a guy named Bill Moyer. And I put a note in the chat box with a way you can find out more, and my email address, because a nonprofit devoted to his work is reviving. And we'd like to hear from people who are interested in Bill Moyer's movement action plan, are familiar with it already, as well as those that are curious. Thank you.
Yeah, you see some smiles and grins here, because there's a lot of familiarity in this group with doing democracy, and at least on the part of some of us. And Mary Lou works closely with Bill. And so is that Smith Creek Institute, or is that what you're talking about, or is it another group that's starting?
That's my own personal email address. It looks like I'll be the interim executive director as of a few days ago, so I'm still working out a link between our main email and me. So my personal one is smithmillcreek@gmail.com.
Are you going to include some of his stuff that's been less available than doing democracy, like the Dominator Peaceful Relationships work?
We haven't even begun the evaluation process of what to do next. And that is a great idea. Yeah.
Just Matt, I don't know if you can see, I'm also working with Jim on this.
Oh, you're working together. Yeah.
Yeah, she's my boss. She's the board chair.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Okay. Anyone else want to chime in? I see a chat there. Thanks, Sarah.
Yeah.
Sarah, I used one of your books so long ago when I wrote a paper on the militia movement.
No, that wouldn't have been me. I'm sorry.
No, really?
No. Yeah,
There another Sarah Diamond? You didn't write Roads to Dominion? I was like, oh, wow.
No,
what?
I wish. I'll take credit for it, though.
Okay.
No, that's not me. I'm an anthropologist by training. I did work in India, so things I published were about South Asia.
Not about the militia movement in the United States. So, anybody else got anything you want to chat about? Samuel, I want to see, is your microphone working now? Can we hear your voice?
All right, it's working out now.
Okay,
Hello,
were you
Matt.
able to hear for, yes, hello, Samuel. Were you able to hear?
Yeah, but I think I'll hear more from the
Okay. A little slowed down the signal, I think. Okay, anyone else? We're just hanging out here.
Matt, this is Tammy on the phone. How do we access or find someone's email address? I spoke with someone in a breakout group with whom I want to continue, well, actually two.
If you tell me their names, or if you email me their names, I can send you the info. We haven't quite figured out if we're like just having a public open, I mean, it should be a public open list, but we just haven't figured ourselves out yet.
Okay, I can email you then.
Okay.
As a group, we learned a lot of things during these calls
Yeah.
about how to organize ourselves.
Yeah. We're learning.
Matt, this was recorded.
Thank you, Dina.
How do people access it?
Well, that's what we're learning too. I think that we'll probably be uploading it to YouTube. That seems like the most enduring option.